those of you that have me in class know that I don't like a lot of PowerPoint. I like the engaging piece, so I don't have a lot of slides here, but I do want to give you some information and then let you all take from it some takeaways to when you leave here. So just simple questions. Do you ever find yourself doing any of these things, like spend all night studying for something that you should have taken no more than an hour or two of your time? Do you find yourself spending way too much time on one specific area that you neglect others? That's a common problem. Do you find yourself your mind wandering? A lot of times you've got other classes, you've got things that maybe you have to sacrifice so you can study, work, family, friends, social responsibilities. All of those things can contribute to your mind wandering. That can be an obstacle to successful studying. And then, do you ever find every excuse possible to put off studying? And so, I really should clean my room today. Oh, I haven't called my grandmother lately. I wonder if I could go find something to do besides studying. So those things are real, and that's just part of life, that we seem to have this sense of procrastination. And so forming good habits when studying is very important. So organization. And these are some specific things you can do to make sure that you're organized. Do you have all the materials you need for class and for it to be successful? And so when you find that time and that space to study, do you have what you need? Do you have the textbook? Are you always constantly relying on someone else for the textbook, or do you have the textbook? Do you have the notes from class? Are you attending class, and do you have your own personal notes? And if you miss class, do you have you talk to the professor or the people around you to get the material that you need? Do you have the computer and access to the internet, which can often get you information very quickly and can fill in a lot of the gaps in your work just by using search engines and this sort of thing? You just need to make sure that you're using reliable sources, but there are a lot of resources out there for you. And then, of course, just pen and paper so that you can write down some questions that you may have as you're going through a to-do list or create that study guide or whatever it may be. So, and then also being organized also means what you do in class. A lot of times class is condensed in that 50-minute window, and so a professor may be giving you lots of information very quickly, and so you're writing as fast as you can for 50 minutes, and then you get out of class and you've got to be able to put those notes in an order that will make sense to you. And you have to have a sense of being able to read your writing or to be able to organize those in a way that you can go back and recall what you need to know. And then, and just creating a plan. So if you know a test is going to cover 4 or 5 chapters or several different sections, have you blocked out the appropriate amount of time to retain that information and to get that information to you? So creating a plan. How much time do I need to study for this? And planning those things out. So just forming a game plan is step number 1. What are you going to do to be successful and make sure that you have everything you need, whether it's a resource or the time, to be able to be successful? So key number 2, we'll move on, is controlling the environment. A lot of times we want to, you feel that tug between the social or those other responsibilities you have, and so you might say, well, I'll head over to the student center and I'll take some books with me and review and try to study in an environment where it's social. You really need to create an environment where you can zone in and you know that that's your study time. We're creatures of habit, and so we are going to do the same things over and over again. And I see a lot of you all that are freshmen, and so creating these study strategies now, you're developing habits that will hopefully sustain you through graduation. And so finding that comfortable place, and so you want to find a place where your mind can immediately say, okay, this is my study place. This isn't my texting place. This isn't my surfing the internet place. This isn't my socializing place. This isn't my get my coffee place. This is where I study. And so you go to that place and you use it over and over again. When I was in school, I would go to the same study room in the library. They still have study rooms over there. I had to go to the same study room every time. I would ask for that number, and then if it wasn't available, it threw me off. But I just knew where I was going to go, and so I knew that was the place that I'd go. Find what works for you. Your dorm room, if you have a roommate, it could be a challenging place. You know, the student center could be a challenging place. But you have to find what works for you and be realistic in that. Minimize the distractions. There are times when you've got to leave your cell phone on, but if you can silence your cell phone or turn it off, or maybe you need to get away from the internet and focus on the textbooks or the notes. All the distractions around, if you can eliminate those, you'll be much more successful. And pay attention to little things. Lighting, the placement of your materials can all affect your concentration. If you know that if you're warm and you're sitting on a soft couch and that you're immediately going to nod off to sleep after that first chapter of reading, then maybe you need to sit in a desk at a chair where it's well lit and that you know that you'll be setting yourself up for success. So paying attention to those little things of knowing where you can be successful and defining that environment. So I see several of you taking notes, maybe later this evening say, what is that environment where I study best? Think about those times that you were successful and where you prepared, and what were the characteristics of those places. So, because it's probably different for each of you. It really will be. So you can also work on your concentration, and you need to be aware. We talked about those distractions. You need to be aware of those things that you can control that are external, like the lighting, the seating, the comfort. If I'm in the dorm room, man, my bed's right there. I can just roll over into bed. And so be aware of those things. But also there's these internal things that, whether it's a to-do list, you're overwhelmed, you're anxious, there's something going on at home, there's relationships that you need to work through and challenges there. And so know internally what you've got going on. And so if you're stressed, find a way to de-stress before you study, whether it's through exercise or whatever it needs to be. And then when you have the opportunity to study and you say, this is my time to study, do your best to block that out and be totally consumed and invested into what you're doing. So to stay on task, set a goal before you begin your study time and stick to it. So I'm going to study for an hour and I'm going to cover this chapter. I'm going to review my notes from class before I go to bed for this past week, whatever it may be. You can check things off. A lot of times lists work for a lot of people, and that depends on your personality too. But okay, I know this concept. I've read this chapter. I've done this, and just mark it off. And so you can see the sense of accomplishment that you have. When you have random things pop in your head, have a notepad that's something separate. Don't and say, man, I really got to pick up that birthday present for my aunt before I go home for the weekend. Write that down, put it aside, and keep moving. Try to stay on task. And then you all mentioned this, creating that plan where you have manageable tasks. And so don't be unrealistic of, the test is on Monday. On Sunday, I'm going to study from lunchtime until dinner. I'm going to have that 6 hours, and I'm going to study, and that's all the time I need. You'll be much more successful if you study in hour, 2-hour blocks, over a course of several days. And then on that last day, use it to review all your material. And several of these things I've already mentioned, but just be focused. Be in the now of my purpose and for this time is to study, and try not to multitask when you are studying. Number 4 is just building your memory skills. A lot of times, just studying is creating habits, just as I said. So you can create bad habits, or you can create habits that will set you up for success. And so you really need to think about ways that you can improve your memory, and that's a skill that you can develop. People that can memorize and have that, what we call maybe a photographic memory or whatever, that's something that some people have a gift for, but it is also a skill that you can acquire, and so you can continue to practice. So if you have an interest for the area, try as hard as, especially when y'all are freshmen, so there's going to be some general education classes that you're going to have that you're going to be like, oh, this is miserable. I really don't care anything about this subject. But if you can find some way to relate it to something broader and something bigger, you're going to be more successful. And then when you get into your major, choose something that you want to learn about. It's a lot easier in it's amazing what you retain in a story or a newspaper article. If you're interested in sports or you're interested in some type of hobby and you read an article about something that you're interested in, how quickly you retain that information. So if you can find some level of interest in it, you're going to be much more successful. And then in class, this kind of goes back to what I was talking about yesterday, but if you are in class and you are presented with information, if you go in with the purpose of, I'm going to listen to this and hear it, and I'm going to try to retain it, I'm going to hear it and remember it for the purpose of that, instead of I'm going to hear it and write it down and then go back and listen. Try to keep that in mind as well. I'm not going to read all these to you, but some of the things that some other strategies you can do is recite things out loud or find someone that you can discuss it. We all learn. You can learn and retain information by listening. Like some of the things that I say today, you will hear and you'll walk out the door and you'll remember. One of the reasons I had you talk in groups is sometimes just verbalizing it. When you actually speak it to someone, you're more likely to remember it. And then actually doing it. It's something that you can actually do. That's one of the reasons we have labs and that sort of thing. If you can, or a math problem or whatever, if you can actually practice it, is another way. So don't be afraid to try new ways to retain information. Pictures and images and those sorts of things, like if you're rewriting, I saw someone say rewrite their notes, and so even rewriting some things, or drawing the diagram or the chart, or looking at a photograph that maybe illustrates the point that's being made, those things that you can recall in your memory that could help you out. And then I already mentioned the more frequent study sessions. Don't try to block it all at one time, but to separate things out, and look over your material regularly. That kind of goes hand in hand. Don't wait. Don't take notes for an entire section of the course and then not look at them until test day. Make sure that maybe you can arrive to class a few minutes early and review the notes from the previous class building or the class meeting, because it'll build upon each other. So those are ways that you can help with your memory. And the final thing is just being logical, being sensible, being reasonable as far as the expectations you have for yourself. You know what works best for you. You know you better than anyone else. So don't just think because this person studies really well outside when the weather's nice that's the best place for you. Yours may be inside a quiet room by yourself. So find what works for you. For me, for retaining information and reading, morning is the best time for me. And if for you, you may know that I'm not awake until after lunch, and so I may need to devote time in the afternoon. But give your best hours towards academics to your studying as well. So avoid cramming. We've already mentioned that. Know that that's not realistic. If you wait until the last night and say I was pulling all-nighter, you've already identified sleep. All of you all talk about being rested, and so make sure that you're not waiting until the last minute. Use groups when it's appropriate. A lot of times, study groups are very beneficial at the beginning of studying, compiling information, making sure that there's not any missing information in your notes, being able to share those resources, talking out scenarios or information. But when there comes a point where you've got to be individually responsible for that information, and so groups aren't always the best method. They should be a component of your study, but not something that you do exclusively. And then structure your study sessions to allow breaks. And we talked about that. If you block out 6 hours, that's great if you're going to give a whole day to a specific academic discipline or whatever. But have some breaks in there. It's like, I'm going to eat lunch and then go study, and then I'll go work out, and I'll come back and revisit it, and spend time doing that. So those are the five areas that I think that you could really make some drastic improvements. If you will rip that page off, there's a page underneath it, and this is your ticket out of here. So once you're through, your group, if you will just list, let's see, y'all have mostly 5. If you have 1 to 5, if you will just from 1 to 5 write 5 takeaways, 5 things that differ from one another that you're going to do once you leave here to help with your study skills. And then once you do that, I'm going to just come around the room and let you kind of share with me in your individual groups. And then y'all are free to go.